From a huge shift in the state Senate to the incredible legacy of a 104-year-old park ranger to a super quiet rule change that could actually affect your vote. This week in California, we've got 5 stories that might seem totally separate, but they're not. They actually reveal this much bigger picture about power, justice, and the hidden systems that shape all of our lives. Okay, let's get into it. We all see the headlines, right? But what about the currents running underneath all of that? Today, we're going to look beyond the news to see the real machinery at play, the appointments, the history, and yeah, the quiet rule changes that end up having a massive impact. And we're going to start at the very center of power in Sacramento, where a really significant shift in leadership is sending the first ripples of change all across the state. So incoming Senate President Pro Tempore Monique Lamont has just announced her new leadership team. And the big takeaway? 3 experienced members of the Legislative Black Caucus are stepping into some major roles. They're taking the helm of powerful committees that control pretty much everything from labor laws to the state budget. And what's really interesting here is the person behind this quote. That's Senator Lola Smallwood Cuvas. She's a former labor organizer who will now chair the Senate Labor Committee. So think about it. She'll be overseeing all the legislation on worker rights, wages, public pensions, and her mission is crystal clear in her own words, using policy to build an economy that actually works for everyone. Next up, we've got Senator Laura Richardson. And her new job? Well, she's chairing the budget subcommittee that basically holds the purse strings for some of the state's most critical agencies. We're talking prisons, courts, public safety, transportation. When it comes to how California spends its money in these areas, her oversight is going to be absolutely central. And finally, there's Dr. Akilah Weber Pearson. Now, as a board-certified pediatrician, she brings a totally unique perspective to her new role as chair of the Senate Health Committee. She'll be shaping legislation on everything from health insurance to pharmaceuticals, and her background as a doctor gives her this firsthand insight into the real-world impact of every single one of those decisions. So, as these new leaders step up to write California's future, we're going to turn to a truly remarkable figure who dedicated her life to making sure we never, ever forget our past, Betty Reed Soskin. Betty Reed Soskin, who passed away recently at 104, lived a life that was just extraordinary. I mean, just look at this timeline. She wasn't just observing history. She was living it, she was shaping it, and then she was interpreting it for all of us. From her work in a segregated shipyard during World War II to becoming the nation's oldest active park ranger. And a huge part of her story is tied to one of the military's worst home front disasters. 320. Let that sink in for a second. That's how many men were killed on July 17, 1944, when 2 ships loaded with ammunition just exploded at Port Chicago. And most of them were Black sailors who had been exclusively assigned the incredibly dangerous task of loading munitions, which was a direct result of the military's segregation policies at the time. Betty was working nearby as a clerk, and that very night, young sailors were at a party at her home right before they had to go back to base. She never saw them again. She later found out one was just 16 years old, and as she said, the memory of him it never left her. For her, this history was deeply, deeply personal. And that fight, the one against historical injustice and its consequences, well, it continues today. It's happening in a different but just as urgent arena, the fight for the health and survival of Black mothers and their babies. I mean, these numbers are just shocking. Even in a state like California, which has relatively strong health outcomes, Black mothers are still 3 to 4 times more likely to die from pregnancy-related causes than white mothers. It's a disparity that policies and programs are really struggling to fix. This is the voice of Gwenae Dismuke, a Los Angeles mother who experienced firsthand just how hard it can be to navigate the medical system. And her story really highlights a potential solution that's gaining a lot of ground, having a dedicated advocate like a doula or a nurse right there by your side. So, what is the state actually doing about this? Well, in 2023, California officially made doula services a covered benefit under Medi-Cal. The whole idea is to give mothers an advocate, someone to help with birth plans, education, and to be there during labor and delivery, with that support continuing for a full year after the baby is born. It's a systemic response to a systemic problem. But for advocates like midwife Jenny Joseph, the crucial point is this. This isn't a physiological issue. The disparities we're seeing aren't because of biology. She argues the root causes are systemic, racism, classism, and gender discrimination that are just baked into the healthcare system itself. Okay, Now let's pivot a little bit. We're going to go from these highly visible crises to the invisible structures that also govern our lives. We're talking about the hidden rules and bureaucratic changes that can quietly have a massive impact on millions and millions of people. Let's talk about the Postal Service. A recent clarification has completely changed what a postmark even means. It used to be simple. It was tied to when you dropped a letter in the mailbox. Now it's tied to when the USPS processes that mail at a sorting facility, which could be days later. It's a really small change in definition, right? But it has potentially huge consequences. So why does this matter so much? Well, think about it. For anyone mailing a ballot in a state that requires it to be postmarked by Election Day, this rule means you could mail it on time, but it could get postmarked late, and your vote might not get counted. And the same exact risk applies to healthcare appeals, legal documents, really anything with a strict deadline. The risk has been shifted from the institution back to you, the individual. And it's not just old systems that have these hidden rules. A whole new set is being written right now for artificial intelligence. Voters might soon get to decide on a ballot measure to regulate AI products for kids. But the tech industry is pushing back hard, arguing that restrictions could stifle innovation. This is a battle over the foundational rules for a technology that's going to shape all of our futures. So, with all these changes happening in leadership, in policy, in technology, what is actually on the minds of the nearly 40 million people who call California home? What do they want? The number is 73%. According to a new survey from the Public Policy Institute of California, that's the percentage of likely voters who expect bad times financially in the next year. That is a huge number. It signals this deep sense of economic pessimism, right, across the board. And when you look at the top concerns, it's really all about the wallet. The economy, inflation, and the absolutely crushing cost of housing, which, by the way, 2/3 of Californians call a big problem, are dominating everything else. This deep economic anxiety is the backdrop for all the other stories we've talked about today. Which really leaves us with this final thought. We've seen power shifting at the very top, the lingering weight of historical injustice, a public health crisis rooted in inequality, and these quiet but powerful rule changes happening right under the surface. So the question is, who's really writing California's next chapter? Is it the new leaders, the will of the voters, or is it just the momentum of the systems themselves? That's the real question.